coming to you live from outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court, and this is where the former president makes yet another appearance in this long-running trial, over a decade long now, and some legal pundits saying that this is in part due to his delaying tactics. Some people suggesting that this is in fact what we may possibly observe yet again happening inside the courtroom. But before we get to grips with the legal experts about what is going to happen inside court today, let's perhaps still cast our eyes wide around what is happening outside the court, seeing lots of people, Sbu Ngalwa, many people aligned to the former president Jacob Zuma. You have heard Kalni House interviewed by Zianda Ngobo. On the other hand, family member, the son, Edward Zuma, talking to Bongadlulane, catching with the corner of my eye, someone who is also seen to be aligned with the former president is the former secretary of the African National Congress in the KZN provincial executive, Super Zuma, who coincidentally shares a name with the former president. Do we expect the leadership, the current leadership of the ANC in KZN to once again make an appearance here, given the kind of reception they received last week?
And I think the presence of some of the people we have seen, it kind of explains the current political mood in KwaZulu-Natal, and also given the fact that there is a coming provincial conference, so there are a lot of implications. There is a lot that is at play. I mean, we know that Jesse Duarte in a press conference yesterday fired some warning shots to some of the ANC leaders like Tony Yengeni, Ace Makashule and Kalni House, saying that their behavior will be investigated. But if you look at today's stage, compared to last week, it looks like we have a much bigger stage today, and the noise levels are actually much more amplified. Is that perhaps a sign of what we are likely to see? Are we likely to see some kind of defiance from some of these leaders? Kalni House has already said that if he's given an opportunity to speak, he will be speaking. But yes, the leadership of the ANC will be here. Yesterday, Mtumiseni Nduli, the provincial secretary, did say that they will be back here today, to show support.
What is there to gain, Sbu Ngalwa? We're going to bring Mpumelelo Zikalala in just a moment on the legal aspect of things, but what is there to gain for the current leadership of the ANC in KZN to be here and be seen to be alongside the former president as he goes through this particular legal process, given the step-aside issue? Because the understanding of the step-aside issue, Sbu Ngalwa, is that this has to do with the ANC trying its best to shed this image of corruption. Now, how do they do that successfully whilst they contradict themselves? Because it is a contradiction.
Look, the reality is that Jacob Zuma may be facing legal challenges and personal challenges, but the man still commands some support. And I think in terms of crafting the narrative of himself as a political victim, I think it has done very well in projecting himself as such. And that, as you would remember, is what catapulted him to the highest office in the land. And if you look at his plea, his argument today, that will be debated here in court, the issue is still about him being some kind of a victim of a political conspiracy. Now that argument, rightful or wrongful, it still finds resonance with some of the supporters. So you may have him in court, but you cannot discard him. But not Super Zuma, may be confusing. Tumiseni Ntuli, actually, the provincial secretary, last week, he made the point that they are here not because they are ardent supporters of the former president. They are here to make sure that the campaign or the coalition around him is not hijacked by some people who are using it for their own narrow political interests. So effectively, they are also here for political reasons as opposed to an outright support of the former president.
And one of the most interesting comments I've heard is that part of why they see it important to be here is that the former president is still a very important factor in as far as attracting a vote to the ANC. But let's, for a moment, park the political issues and bring in the legal side of things. You would have heard from Edward Zuma. I'm not sure if you would have, because you obviously do not have the connection, Mpumelelo Zikalala. But Edward Zuma suggesting that if the former president is indeed in front of a court where the judge is impartial, then he possibly stands a chance to get a fair trial, which is part of what is going to be discussed here. The unfortunate bit is that when we were joined by the NPA spokesperson here earlier, Sbu Ngalwa, you couldn't conclude our discussion because of the technical issues. What I wanted to put to him was this whole issue by the former president suggesting that Billy Downer filing an affidavit in support of the DA review of the trial against the former president being terminated by the NPA, that on its own seems to point to a Billy Downer, a state prosecutor who is neither independent and also lacks impartiality. Do you think they have a point? Should Billy Downer have done that?
Maybe let's start with the impartiality. You want a presiding officer that is impartial. However, we're just going to use the legal prescripts and the legal framework that we have. Now, in this case, it is the Constitution, it is the Criminal Procedure Act, it is the relevant rules of evidence dealing with how we accept evidence within the court.
Let me just interrupt you, Mpumelelo. What we're seeing now are visuals of the former Minister of Finance, the former Minister of Public Enterprises, Malusi Gigaba, entering the court. That's a very interesting phase. Sbu Ngalwa. Sorry to interrupt you, Mpumelelo, but this is actually going to be part and parcel of the broadcast here today.
Sure
these faces of people, Sbu Ngalwa, who are seen as supporters of the former president, what do you make of the former minister being and standing side by side the former president?
It is quite an interesting development, Xoli, I must say, given the fact that the former minister is currently in the news for reasons that have nothing to do with what the president is here today, owing to his own relationship that he has to explain with the Gupta family. But I think for anyone now who finds themselves in a political bind, if I may call it that, it actually makes sense to find some kind of comfort in a coalition of sorts, in a coalition of, for lack of a better word, the walking wounded. I mean, we know that from the evidence that has been led at the state capture, that the former Minister of Finance is quite unhappy with how he was treated by the former president. But I guess in politics there are no permanent friends, in the same way that there are no permanent enemies. Remember that it was the former Minister of Finance who gave that interview to CNN in 2018 February, saying that the president should step aside, in fact should resign from his position, and that shocked many people who had regarded him to have been a favorite, as he would have loved to be known, according to the evidence of his former wife, or a strange wife rather. So I guess his being here has more to do with the politics again, rather than the outright support for the president. We saw him once again, lastly, when the former Minister of Intelligence, Bongani Bongo, was in court. We saw the former Minister there of Finance also pledging his support and being by his side. So it's politics more than anything.
Indeed. Mpumelelo Zikalala, before we wrap it up and throw it back to studio, I interrupted your thought process around Billy Downer filing an affidavit in support of the DA wanting to revive his case.
In fact, the former president may have a point to that, but the most important question is, when do you raise it? You don't raise it at this stage using Section 106. You raise it once the trial has started, and in the path of giving your evidence or disputing the evidence from the states. That's when you keep on dropping hints and calling your witnesses into the impartiality and to the infringement of your rights per Section 35 of the Constitution.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very much for those legal insights, Mpumelelo Zikalala. He's going to be with us here throughout this court day, and I can tell you there is lots more coming from us here in Pietermaritzburg High Court. For the moment, Michelle and Ayanda, let's throw it back to you. Lots of other news making headlines today, including that all-important story around the health minister. You would have thought this administration is the one, as the president, the current president who campaigned on the ticket of anti-corruption, would have made it clear that he wants to see the back of that. Well, what might you say now?